Of course, I am not he, but we will hear from shortly. But we're going to change just a little bit, and we're going to do an introduction of the Shiloh Institute that Prince ICL Ben Israel just talked about working with. First and foremost, good evening to each of you. Giving honor and respect to all the active and past elected officials, Council General of Israel, Prince ICL Ben Israel, staff of this great museum, and all those who have played an integral role in making this night just simply magnificent. My name is Michael Smith Jr., and I am a public health practitioner who received my MPH and certificate in global health from the Penn State College of Medicine. I currently do work in HIV related to the National Minority AIDS Council in DC, the New York City Department of Health, and adjunct professor of public health at Point University in Georgia. And it's my desire to take just a few moments just to paint the picture of the work before us and how impactful just a short experience in Israel can be life-changing. My first time traveling to Israel was in summer 2018, and I must say it was one of the most magnificent experiences of my life. I got a chance to see historical sites, learn about the Holocaust, and engage in critical conversations related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the surrounding areas. And oh, how can I forget? The food, of course, was amazing, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why I gained 10 extra pounds in just 1 week. But at that time, I was working at Morehouse College and realized how important and nuanced this geographical area was to the Middle East. Therefore, I made it my mission to introduce Morehouse students to Israel and surrounding areas. To date, I was able to coordinate 2 trips for Morehouse students, totaling approximately 50 students. One of those students is here working, John Cooper. It's something special about being able to gather students across different majors, disciplines, to be able to engage in each other in thought-provoking topics that challenge each of us to be ethical leaders, moral cosmopolitans, leaders who think globally and act locally. I've seen it for myself, psychology majors and sociology majors who began to think critically about social factors that influence behaviors, specifically in this region. Religion majors who make the scriptures just come alive. Business students who think rational and critical about what they're seeing. And health science students who get a chance to critique and evaluate social determinants of health and action from an Israeli perspective. I know you can only imagine how impactful it is for students, young people, African Americans, to be able to experience a life-changing moment. Israel is a very special place like none other, where each of us can learn, grow, and love. I've learned and loved this place so much that I've traveled to Israel 4 times. But none of this could have been possible if it wasn't for a very special lady who believes in empowering young adults to be global change agents. My opportunity to grow, be an advocate, and curate experiences for students would have not been possible if it wasn't for Christina King. I am excited for the work of Shiloh because the scripture says, eyes have not seen, nor have ears heard. I'm excited for the work of Shiloh because we have a leader who believes in training and empowering young adults to think critically and engage communities to promote love, peace, and justice. We have a leader who preaches the gospel and uses words if necessary. We have a leader who has the social conscience of Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Prince ICL Ben Israel. We have a leader who is at the heart of the community with the community at heart. So everyone, please help me in commending and celebrating the Executive Director, President Miss Christina King, for her work, dedication, and commitment to excellence. Come on,
is this person they're talking about? But I just want to take a few moments to introduce you to some of the leaders from the Shiloh Institute, the organization that is about to be launched, with the mission of helping to cultivate ethical global leaders through the development of their spiritual, ethnic, and national identity. Spiritual identity as Judeo-Christians, their national identity as African Americans, and their ethnic identity as descendants of Africa. Our goal and our output are these young leaders who we're going to bring up, and also to help to change the conversation between the Black and Jewish community as we've done today. When I met Prince Asiel, what I understood is that as many of us as Christian young leaders and as Christians in America, we didn't even know this story. We didn't even know this story that was critical in our African American history. And every time that we talked about it, African American, especially young people, were fascinated to know and to see Israel in a different light by learning about this story, the story of Prince Asiel and the Hebrew community, and they would always ask old and young leaders, how is Israel treating, and how did Israel treat this community? So it's been a pleasure to have you all this evening. I want to just share just a few moments for you to see some of the young leaders who have experienced Israel and many other experiential learning opportunities, some of the new global leaders, ethical global leaders that we're raising up in this world. So if we'll just take just a few moments of your time, and then we will have the benediction. So.
Good evening, and thank you so much, distinguished guest, and thank you, Christina King, for this wonderful opportunity to speak. My name is Festus Amoy, and I am a Nigerian American. And my parents migrated to the United States in the 1980s. Unfortunately, they passed away when I was in high school. And so I had a longing to return to the land of my parents in Nigeria. And so when my mother passed away, I had that opportunity. And there was a surreal feeling that came with landing in that place and leaving that plane and feeling automatically at home. So fast forward, I came back to the United States and joined the military, served my time there. And while in college, I had this longing again to return home. But in the midst of that longing, I had a chance to go to Israel through passages in Philos and what is now becoming the Shiloh Institute. And so I'm very grateful for those origins there. And I had that surreal feeling again when landing in Israel. And in that surreal feeling, I felt at home, and I wonder if it's because of the biblical context or the historical context that we share in that land. In that land that some people would like to tear apart for whatever reasons, through ideology or through hatred or other forms of discord. And in that land, we have a place called the Great Rift Valley, which if that rift was to split, Israel will fall on the side of Africa, right? And so that's what I represent, and that's what we represent here today, those who are the diaspora of Africa, who have a surreal experience to know Israel also as our own home, whether it be through spiritual context, whether it be through historical context or otherwise. I'll share a scripture with you in John 1:35 through 42. John calls to his disciples and he says, "Behold the Lamb of God." And immediately two of his disciples followed him. And it says they spent time together. That time was in fact impactful and had far-reaching implications. As soon as those disciples finished that time with Christ, Andrew went and got his brother Peter. And Peter was known as the Rock. Shiloh is becoming that rock. A place of strength, a place of fondness, a place of stability for Africans in the diaspora who wish to share their home experience of Israel. So with that being said, I want to thank Christina King who continues to call brothers and sisters who wish to share the dialogue, the time of impact with one another in that land, and take that experience and share it with others, both locally and afar. And with that said, Prince Ben Asiel, we commend you today for stepping out to close that rift that so often people have ideologically. Sir, you have served as a bridge. You have served as the cornerstone and stepping stone of a bridge experientially, so that we can trace back our history and bring others to that land. So with that, we say thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Christina King. Thank you.
I'd like to ask our poet to share a few moments with you, Michaela Norwood.
If you have it, then give it. If you talk it, then live it. If hearing the fate of others don't raise the stakes enough for you, let's flip it. Switch the perspective so that it's no longer someone else's pain plastered on the 6 o'clock news. Imagine it's you, the new statistic everyone came to view. True. You forgot about that though, didn't you? Forgot there were once minds used to mold you, hands used to hold you, hearts used to fold you into themselves when you felt all by yourself in school, but you weren't. So don't get it confused, and don't act so far removed. I pity the fool who thinks that they pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps and stilettos, as if there weren't generations of ghettos that made the straps for them to get booted up in. As if there wasn't a cloud of witnesses in the form of Big Mama's knees bent in prayer closets doing the work of rooting out sin. As if when that PWI didn't let you in, there wasn't an HBCU arms open wide saying welcome back home again. As if there weren't neighborhood friends that resembled a lot more like family, knowing Mama's rules and enforcing her boundaries about which streets she could and could not cross, about getting back home before the street lights came on, as if you got on your own, as if these Black-owned businesses weren't built for your benefit, as if your ancestors, who were once called degenerate, didn't build this period, as if your ground wasn't someone else's ceiling, as if your ceiling ain't gonna be someone else's floor, as if their floor won't obtain new doors with ceilings made of glass so someone else can crash through and do better. Dream brighter, reach higher, so they can fly into their new sense of self, as if you didn't need help. Beloved, every single gentle hand that ever caressed your scalp into cornrows, and every corner store that ever let you take milk home for free was sowing seed into the person that one day you were to be. And trust me, there were many generals that made it their mission to run a race that they knew they would not finish, but they did pass the baton, praying in good faith that one day you too would pass it on. So, I say again, if you talk it, then live it. And if you have it, then give it.
Isn't she lovely? Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Quave. I am from Goshen, Mississippi, which is a small town on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I just want to share a few words with you today about the investment that you would be making when investing into the Shiloh Institute. When you speak about the Shiloh Institute, we see the type of leadership that the Shiloh Institute is seeking after to create, to pour into. And I want to share a little bit about my own journey with Israel. Prince Ben Asiel, thank you so much. I think as I've heard all the words tonight, I think about Abraham and how God said, look into the stars, and your descendants will be many, like more than that. And I feel very honored that when you began your journey all those years ago, that God had us in mind. So thank you so much. there's a prayer called the Shema. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Shema. I'm no professional in the, or expert, I should say. I'm still learning. I'm still a student of Israel, still a student of what God has invited me into. My first trip to Israel was in 2014. I was in seminary, and I went over. I was on a trip with all women, and so we got to experience the women of the Bible. And those experiences, I remember we were in a jewelry store, because that's what women do, we buy jewelry. And the rabbi who was speaking to us said, no one just comes to Israel, you have to be invited by God. And I remember just crying. And I didn't know I was crying at that time, but I knew the strong feelings that I was feeling was that I was experiencing someone who knew what I had known to be my religion, Christianity, speak about my God in a way that felt so kin. But and the only thing I had known prior to was that, there was the Jewish culture and religion, and then there was Christianity, but I didn't know a lot of details. But I knew what I knew in that moment as I shed those tears in that jewelry shop is that something about me and this rabbi was synonymous. There was something that was in sync, and there was something that unified us. And what comes to mind with the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4-5, I'll read, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." So I'll just stop there first before I go into verse 5. And what I had learned and what I remember from that time in that jewelry store is that the rabbi said, and I hope I'm quoting this right, but that our religions and our faith were very much like family members and cousins who have the same grandparents, or who have the cousins who have the same, grandparents. I'll just stay there. Everybody gets that. And so with that, I just remember I just bawled crying because for the first time I was being introduced to something deeper in my faith and in my walk, in my journey, and that was that I had some family out there that I didn't know about. So that was in my spiritual, right? My spiritual identity, as we speak about with Shiloh. And so as I continued to become involved, so that was in 2014, ironically before Passages or Philos, any of these organizations existed. And when I came back, I had this burning desire to stay involved with Israel, to stay connected in the way that there was a group of 41 Jewish kids. Yeah, they were on the birthright trip, and I remember they were so young, and I was the youngest person on my trip. And I was in seminary. I was like 20 years younger than the next person before me. So when I saw these young people, I was super excited. And then they were like, "Yeah, we go on this trip." Like they were all telling me all about all of this, and I just remember thinking, "Man, I wish we had that." And it didn't exist at that time. But the seeds were coming because 3 years later, that will launch. And that's how all of us have come to know each other at some point throughout this journey. And so I want you to know that as you continue to hear about Shiloh, as you think about Shiloh, that you are pouring into real human beings, real relationships, like you spoke about, Mr. Jackson, that there is something that is so great about the reconciliation and about the strengthening and the unity that we spoke about of the Jewish and the Black community. And I'm grateful to be a part of that. And as we've grown, I've gone to Israel 3 times. And every time, last time, Michael and I were actually together, and we got to go into some of the places where there were people who looked like me. And I remember the very first time we were on a trip with about 20 people. I was the only Black woman. And the first time I saw another person who looked like me was in a subservient role. And we were at a Shabbat dinner. And I was my heart broke because I felt like, man, like this is what we need to know. We need to know more than what is served to us from a very commercial way, but we need to know the truth. And I didn't know my truth when I started going to Israel. I didn't know my truth spiritually. I didn't know my truth ethnically. I didn't know my truth nationality. Now I've come more into knowing my identity. That's through relationships that we've been able to build, through organizations, from people like Christina, who are devoted to making sure that people like me, who are at the bottom of the state of Mississippi, know that, hey, you are connected to something greater and you are connected to something larger. And though, just like slavery, we got disconnected, there is power, and there is, God has sent forth the people, the Moseses, the Prince Asiels, who are doing the work to open those gaps to bring us back together. And I believe that just as we just witnessed the great return, we're witnessing that with the Black and Jewish relationship, that is a call for action. It is a call for us to come together as one, because we have a God, and behold that God, we are one under him. And so I would like to also just conclude in saying that it is my pleasure and it's my honor to be in a room with people who have committed their lives to the work of things that are far greater than themselves. Thank you for being teachers to people like myself and my peers, that we have a great mantle to assume, that we don't take lightly the days that we walk on this journey. We don't take lightly the roles that you all play, and I know that as service people, it gets hard, but I want to commend you. I pray that right now in this moment that you could feel that your work matters, and that you can see a representation of what it looks like to give and to watch your flowers bloom before you. So with that, I want to say thank you. You will have opportunities to be a part. We will ask you and offer those ways soon. But I just thank you so much for being a part today.